Alex here has got a way of being able to monitor the brain through electrodes. These electrodes go on the brain and be able to measure the brain waves. And what we're going to do is a real showing of brain waves that are going to come through. We hope there's some brain waves in Big Jake, but I'm pretty sure there will be. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a before and after. So we're going to do the brain mapping and see it live. This is very, very unique in that not only are we doing what Alex is doing here, being able to monitor it, and you're going to see it in real time. He can be on the other side of the earth and monitor this and look at the brain waves in real time through a cell phone. So it's a very low cost system to get into so that you can see brain waves, you can chart what's going on, and then turn around, do the light therapy, and see how much improvement has happened in that time. What do you need for usually the time length for mapping the first part of the brain?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Usually we tend to do 1 to 2 minutes baseline and 1 to 2 minutes active, right? So because unfortunately we are getting a little bit of a later start, and I do have a flight to catch like anytime now, so we're going to need to just compress that to 1 minute baseline, 1 minute active. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 1 minute baseline first, and then I'll have Tom turn the light on, and we're going to monitor the active phase and compare and contrast that to the baseline as a very bare minimum scientific observation. I won't call that a study because n equals to 1 is never sufficient for a study. Having said that, it will be interesting to see what goes on when the light goes on. So that's what we'll be.
All right, let's go for it.
So without further ado, I'm going to start with the baseline measurement. Jake, are you okay with everyone watching your brainwaves as this goes on?
That's fine.
I need to ask your permission.
You need to ask them permission, parental approval.
With Jake's permission here, I'm going to start a monitoring measurement algorithm that basically takes Jake's baseline brainwave. We're going to see, some brainwaves, and I'm going to throw some colors as we kind of monitor this. So just bear with me. So what we're doing is we're measuring the baseline now. As you can see, I was just adjusting the sensor position on Big Jake's head because it's got to be tight, or else we're reading garbage, and we don't want to read garbage. We want to read actual quality brainwaves. So now we're creating a baseline. I'm showing. I'm okay.
They're just closer to you.
Yeah. So we're going to see the brainwave distribution, brainwaves that's coming from Jake's head. And we're going to break that down. So in this case, we picked the cingulate, which is the center of Jake's brain. We're going to break that down to several frequencies, specifically theta, alpha, low beta, and mid beta. So we're going to kind of monitor what's going on in these corresponding frequencies, as we're measuring Jake's baseline. Just a little bit of color. I will expand on this after our experiment. Theta is the frequency that's associated often with rest and repair. So when your brain is in theta state, you're building up the energy reserve to be able to actually be able to perform later. When you're in alpha, you're in a sort of relaxed but focused state. When you're in low beta, which is also called SMR, so that's the first baseline. Baseline is complete. Now do we want to turn the light on, Tom?
Yes.
I'll let you do the honor. So now Tom's going to turn the light on.
And we've got it in brain erase mode.
Men in black. There we go.
There's a lot. I'll tell you some of the things I'm trying to forget.
Okay, you got to be quiet now. Jake being quiet, I don't know.
So now we're going to do a minute with Jake under the photobiomodulation. We'll see what kind of impact can you monitor in his brain waves. Okay.
And usually we keep it lower, but we can't because there's sensors on his head.
So just waiting for stable signal. So if you can see those lines getting cleaner as the contact improves between the sensor and the scalp. And you can see that the signal quality increase as we improve the clarity of the signal. And this is really important for EEG measurements. Crisp, clear signal. Excellent. Okay, so thanks for bearing with us, guys. Science is always a little tricky when we're trying to get the perfect data measurement, but we got there. So
Okay.
let's take a look at the baseline first, okay? So the baseline, we have 4 spectra, frequency spectrum ranges, ranging from theta, which is 4 to 8 hertz, alpha, which is 8 to 12 hertz, low beta, which is 12 to 15, and mid beta, which is 15 to 20. And here's the distribution of Jake's brainwaves from low frequency to high frequency. Just kind of as a, as a baseline here. You can see there's some noise here, but by and large, it's pretty regulated. So he's got a lot of theta. Jake's a pretty chill guy. He's already kind of in a rest and relaxed stage, but alpha is relatively, it's relatively flat and subdued. Alpha is around 0.85 and has started climbing into 0.98. This is all during the first minute, which is baseline. In other words, that's absent of any kind of influence from photobiomodulation, right? So this you can see as an energy profile. So we have higher amplitude or power in the lower frequency spectrum. This is because naturally human brains generate higher power when you look at a lower frequency. When you up the frequency, the power drops. Basically corresponding to the frequency, an inverse relationship. We call this the 1/f relationship, f being frequency. So I want you to remember these. It's pretty good brainwaves, not a lot of noise, so we're pretty sure we're reading the real brainwaves.
No noise.
Okay. Now let's look at the active part. Okay, you can see that already we've got much higher alpha readings.
This is just when you're just starting, the light has just come in and we started monitoring.
Right, so you can see the profile has been raised over the baseline. So you can see that alpha started off being 1.01 and it started increasing and theta started decreasing. So you got some increase in low beta activity across the time range here. So overall the profile energetic activation has been raised. So there's another couple of interesting observations. His peak alpha here is 12.5. Now let's take a look at what the old peak alpha is. This is around 12.4, so it's about similar, but you can see there's more pronounced peaks here, close to 12.5.
If you want a laser pointer to point.
Yeah, actually that'd be great, thanks. Yeah. So you can see that there are distinct alpha peaks that are presenting in the active phase compared to the baseline phase. This is because photobiomodulation has been known to increase peak alpha in even short-term measurement because the way that photobiomodulation works for the brain is when the light hits the brain. I'm just going to go into my kind of soapbox now in terms of the science behind this. So, okay, I apologize. So what happens when the light hits the brain or any cellular structure for that matter? When we have near infrared, the light absorption starts in your cellular structure. This part of the cell called mitochondria, which is your energy production plant. There is a photoactive cell called CCE. It's a cytone that basically gets light activated. When the light hits it, it absorbs the near infrared energy, start generating something called ATP. So this stands for adenine triphosphate, which is really the ready-to-use fuel for your cells to start activating. Okay? So with increased adenine triphosphate, you have quickly focused photobiomodulation on the brain. So we kind of talked a little bit about the brainwaves aspect, so I want to give a quick review. Why do we use EEG? What is EEG? EEG is a fancy big word for brainwaves. It stands for electroencephalography, which is a Greek word for brain. So this is essentially mapping of brain activities by using the topical electrical activity measurements. We analyzed 2 different characteristics of the measurement, being amplitude, how high the waves are. So this is kind of like any waves you have. How high the waves are, or how close together does the wave stagger? How fast is it rippling, right? So one speaks to energetic level in terms of amplitude, the height. The other speaks of
If you want to turn yourself around to
slightly
see
different,
that.
that's frequency, right? So height and frequency combined determines the total energetic dispersion on the physical level when it comes to any wave properties. Now, we looked at what each and every one of these waves means, so just quick review. Delta is asleep, theta is rest and repair. This is really important. Alpha is relaxation, task inhibition, sensing. Beta is cognitive effort, focus, readiness, doing. Gamma is a higher level of consciousness, being, knowing, sort of like on a higher integrated level. So this is a very, very quick, brief version of the introduction. There's a lot more to these brainwaves depending on where you're looking at them. So let's have a look at what generally happens. This is actually one of our brains that's undergoing PBM. That's actually Tom's brain. So we look at it in the afternoon on a Friday. So you can see in the baseline here, this is a much more sophisticated analysis that we use our full truth rate to analyze what's going on. There's a lot of slow waves in the frontal cortex. What this means is that Tom's brain is kind of, in a sort of fatigued or almost falling asleep. This is Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. There's a lot of slow waves in the front here, all the way through the faster waveforms here. And then when you look at the brain connectivity, most connectivity is centered around delta spectrum, which is kind of the sleepy spectrum, right? So when the light went on, the slow waves got pulled into the center back, which is where they belong, and you can see some of the faster waves like high beta and mid beta start pulling into the front, right? So when you look at the connectivity patterns, the hyperconnectivity shifted from delta to theta, which is kind of a rest and repair frequency. So, from a neurological complexity point of view, Tom's brain went into a rest and repair very quickly when the light went on. This is a 2 minutes baseline compared to active reading, okay? Or 3 minutes, sorry. So, moving on. Remember when we were talking about the peak alpha? Peak alpha is a pretty interesting metric when it comes to overall brain health. Why? It indicates the speed at which your brain operates to process information. You sort of think of it as your clock speed for a CPU or a computer, right? So if you have a higher peak alpha, tends to be associated generally with higher brain processing speed, more optimized neurological health. A lower than threshold peak alpha can be indicative of some type of neurological issues, such as traumatic brain injury, such as perseverance, processing challenges, or cognitive challenges, right? So Tom's peak alpha was kind of on the normal side, around 9.5. You see a lot of these are 9.5. Let's call it average between 9 and 9.5 in the baseline here. With 3 minutes lights on, 1050 nanometer, you can see what happened with his peak alpha here. So it went from 9 to about 11 on average, this is across the entire globe. So here we used 8-channel measurement to make sure that we got all the different parts, as opposed to 4-channel measurement, 3 parts. Just now we used 8-channel measurement, so you can see the difference here between baseline and active state, right? So how did you feel when you did that, Tom? When that went on?
Well, after more energized, just a little clearer thought. Yeah, and one time before, I was really burned out, and I figured I was dealing with the FDA. I put the helmet on for 10 minutes because I just wanted to go to sleep. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't want to do any computer work. I couldn't even look at the computer, as it was just kind of a fog to me. And I went under the helmet for 10 minutes, and I was so fired up that I could do 2 more hours of work on the computer. And we went out to eat a lasagna dinner, which usually puts me to sleep. But I was fired, and I was ready to take on the task for more computer work later that evening. So, yeah, it really does help.
Thank you, Tom. So you can see the frequency spectrum dispersion. So the active profile spectrum raised by about 20 to 30%. This is a significant change based on compared to baseline. While they maintain similar shape, 2 things worth notice: that the peak alpha has increased dramatically in the second graph here, and also the baseline table profile is just much higher. So this indicates the brain is absorbing energy through the photoadenine triphosphide process, the energy is being converted to neurological activities where the neurons are giving out electrons and taking them back at a higher rate at elevated amplitude. You can see the energy dispersion changes completely. And in Tom's case, he's also had increased theta production here that's dramatically different than the first photo. So when you see his baseline theta, it's hovering around 0.6 or so, went as high as 0.7. And the second one, he started out around 1.3, went all the way up to 1.5, almost a 50%, or sorry, 100% increase in theta as to rest and recovery. So this is another view of where the energy goes when it's been absorbed by the brain cells, okay? This is a slightly different picture. What this is heart rate variability. Now we've also measured Tom, in terms of heart rate. I can't go any louder, I'm sorry. What does this mean? Heart rate variability is a common metric that's typically used to assess autonomic nervous system health. So when we transform the heart rate variability, which is a standard deviation of peak-to-peak heart rate, in physiology, this is indicative of how the autonomic nervous system is behaving, right? So we divide the frequency into 3 different ranges instead of 6. Very low frequency, which is long-term rest and repair. Low frequency, which is also called baroflex frequency, which is readiness, demand task ready. High frequency, which is sympathetic frequency. So you can see in the first profile, Tom's 3 frequencies are fairly evenly distributed for much of the baseline period. You can see that the low frequency is slightly over the high frequency, so there's some sympathetic vigilance here, and then this crosses over, goes down, so they're really about very comparable. So it's not a lot of rest and repair going on, there's not a lot of baroflex readiness going on in terms of task demand. So look at the second graph. Right, so it starts off very much the same way, somewhere in the middle. The low frequency, which is also called the base resonance frequency, starts taking over, and the other 2 start getting suppressed. What this means is his autonomic nervous system goes into a readiness state, which has some correlation with what's happening neurologically, because when our autonomic nervous system starts getting ready, it signals some kind of shift to autonomics to parasympathetic state from sympathetic state through the vagal nerves from the cardiac system to the cognitive system, right? So you can see that this changes sort of like coincide with what we talked about in the brain earlier, which I thought was something that's really interesting. Sort of this is measured at the same time the brainwave is measured. So there's something there in how our autonomic nervous system or our central nervous system act together when there's energy put into it, when it's going into sort of a accelerated healing state rather than a sort of dormant baseline state. So I'd just like to share these facts with you. So there's a lot more that we don't know than we do know at this point when it comes to scientific research about the longitudinal effect. These are more sort of the acute effects.
And you got a flight to catch. Are you good for another minute, or?
I'm good for a couple questions. Yes. Dr. Murray.
Is it possible to generalize in terms of the amplitude and frequency effect of the BPM that it generally increases amplitude and frequency, or how can you generalize to the brain waves in that regard? In other words, in terms of the neuromodulatory effect, is it
Yes.
too simple?
Yes, there's a way to generalize that. I don't want to overgeneralize it because that runs afoul of risk of trivializing something that's otherwise complex. But by and large, what you will see is general rates of energetic level. When you look at the power spectral density graph, what happens is you will see an elevation in the entire graph compared to baseline. So that represents, again, an increased absorption of light energy turning into adenine triphosphide, which provides cellular energy that causes the brainwave firing to occur at a much more in a much higher amplitude and much higher power. So that's number
frequency.
one. And frequency. Frequency is a bit more complex because it redistributes the frequency towards healing, rest, and repair during the acute phase of exposure. So what I mean by that is when you have the lights turned on, the brain's kind of going into, hey, let's make more resources, let's kind of chill out, let's stop the vigilant sort of behavior, go into more rest and repair. So you're pushing the energy from low beta alpha back towards theta, and some part of it goes towards gamma. It depends on whether the light source is continuous or modulating, because in this case we use a continuous light source, which means there isn't a frequency component that is interfering with the measurement. So you're more likely to see that energy distributed to a slightly lower register or lower frequency. So in theta spectrum, we are observing an increased amplitude on theta.
All right, so I want to thank you, Alex, for doing this. This was fantastic.